Hello, welcome to Manhwa Nuna, and today we will be recapping the manhwa called Call Me Master. Please like, comment, and subscribe to help the channel grow. Enjoy. The manhwa begins with our protagonist, Ananse, in a very intimate position with her captive, who has only one horn. He kisses and licks her ear, holding both her hands in his big hand, while she moans and twitches. He tells her to open her eyes, and points out that she is the one who permitted this act. She apologizes. He quickly flips himself so that he is facing her, and tells her that a master never apologizes to her captive. He takes her hand and puts the chain around his neck and her hands, to remind her that she is the master. She thinks that if she hadn't lost her standing as a master, she wouldn't have been humiliated by this captive. She holds the chain tighter, and kisses him as she thinks that all this tragedy began when she lost her memory. All of this begins at the Holy Empire of Pa. In the bustling city, a woman picks up a fruit and exclaims in surprise as she asks the seller where this fruit is from. The seller replies by saying that the emperor conquered the glacial kingdom this time, so the fruit is probably plunder from those lands. Then the woman says that she supposes Ananse brought back a whole bunch of captives again, and the trader says that she did. He also says that he doesn't know why the underworld won't send someone to take Ananse, and the woman shushes him. Then she whispers to him saying that it just happened that the devil woman referring to Ananse was stabbed by one of her own captives, and she heard that Ananse is knocking on death's door as they speak. The man laughs, saying karma finally came for Ananse, and he hopes she changes her ways with this. He also says that Ananse might repent if she manages to stay alive, but then they laugh saying that the devil woman can't repent, and that the chance of her being reincarnated is higher. Meanwhile, Ananse is lying in her massive bathtub, bleeding out. When she opens her eyes, she's immediately startled. Nothing looks familiar, and she has no idea where she is. Her mind is blank. She touches her aching stomach, and when she looks at her blood-covered hand, she's even more confused. It's not just the pain that's concerning her. She realizes she can't remember anything, not who she is or what's happening. Before she can process it, there's a knock on the door. Someone calls her name and announces that they've brought the offender, just as she ordered. 2 guards enter, dragging in a captive. As soon as he sees her, his eyes widen with shock, and he lunges forward, making her flinch. The guards force him down on his knees, and before Ananse can ask what's going on, they tell her they're leaving and shut the door, leaving her alone with the man. She's left bewildered and struggling to understand the situation. The captive looks at Ananse's injury, and asks her if she wants to flaunt her injury like it couldn't end her life. Dizzy and overwhelmed, she clutches her head, unable to respond. He suddenly breaks free from his restraints, steps into the bath, and grabs her. Then he says that he assumes that she is prepared for the consequences of summoning the man who tried to end her life. He presses the injury, and she hits him on the chest, asking him to let her go, but he ignores Ananse and says that this time he shall end her life without fail, then calls her his master. With tears welling up in her eyes, Ananse begs the captive to let her go, telling him he is hurting her. He's taken aback. He's never seen her cry before. She keeps pleading, saying she doesn't know what she did to deserve this, and asks him to show her some mercy. His shock deepens when she adds that she can't remember anything since waking up. She doesn't even know who she is. She swears that if he spares her life, she will repay the debt somehow. Hearing this, he bursts into hysterical laughter. He comments that he would have expected nothing less from her, and wonders aloud how she always manages to make it impossible for him to even hate her in peace. Gently, he tucks a loose strand of hair behind her ear and reminds her of her previous vow, to offer his head to the emperor. He tells her that no matter what she says now, he can't bring himself to trust her, and calls her Master Ananse with a bitter smile. His tone shifts as he shoves her into the water, strangling her, and demands to know what he really means to her, calling her Nancy. Earlier, after the captive stabbed Ananse on her balcony, he stood there panting, staring at her crumpled form on the floor, while her guards pounded on the locked door, shouting her name. Despite being the one bleeding, Ananse calmly asked what was wrong with him, noting that he looked like he was in more pain than she was. She even told him that the touch of his lips on hers was the only comfort she had left. Raising her trembling hand, she gently touched his face, whispering an apology for breaking him, calling him Solteo. Just then, the guards broke down the door and stormed in, pinning Solteo to the ground. He struggled against them, yelling that she couldn't say those things to him now, not after everything. She smiled, telling him to forgive her and that it is her final punishment to him. Back in the present, Solteo is strangling and drowning Ananse, tears streaming down his face. He chokes out that after everything she said to him, she dares to forget who he is. But she can't hear a word. Slowly, she reaches up and touches his face. Her vision blurs, her hand drops, and then it fades to black. She's gone. Solteo shakes her lifeless body, then cradles her in his arms as he says that this can't be real. He calls her name and then yells as he asks how much cruelty must she subject him to. Ananse finds herself floating in a dark void. She wonders what happened and if she's really dead. She tries to piece together why that man choked her to death and what's going on, but nothing makes sense. Then she thinks that she can't die like this without knowing anything, and she doesn't want to die. Suddenly, her eyes fly open, and she's back in the bathtub, in the very same place she was before. Everything looks the same, and she realizes she's somehow returned to where it all began. Her wound throbs painfully, but she has no time to process it because there's a knock at the door. The guard's voice echoes through, asking if they can enter. Ananse's mind races as she recalls what happened earlier and wonders if she's reliving the same moment. Before she can react, the guards announce they're coming in. Panicking, she scrambles out of the tub, thinking she needs to get away before that man ends her life again. But as the door swings open, Solteo is brought inside, and she finds herself standing right in front of him. Ananse stands frozen, staring at Solteo as her heart races. She knows if she stays, she's as good as dead. Pushing past him with all her strength, she bolts out of the room, ignoring the guards calling her name. Solteo immediately snaps the rope binding him and takes off after her, with the guards hot on his heels. Ananse stumbles into the street, leaving a trail of blood behind. People recognize her and watch in stunned silence, but no one dares to intervene. Panic and confusion swirl in her mind. Was she dreaming? Did that man really unalive her? And if so, did she somehow come back to life? Why is this happening all over again? As she tries to make sense of it all, a man with pink hair catches sight of her and instantly knows who she is. She wanders aimlessly, her head spinning with questions, trying to figure out where to go or how to stop the bleeding. Then, a stranger approaches her, addressing her as Master Ananse. He mentions hearing she was at death's door, and seeing her condition now, it seems the rumors were true. Before she can react, he pulls out a knife, and her eyes widen in shock. He calls her a demon and says people like her deserve to die as he lunges forward. It's all happening again, she thinks. Solteo's voice rings out as he sprints toward her, shouting her name and telling her to run. But before the man can plunge the knife into her, the pink-haired man appears in a flash, swiftly ending the stranger's life. Calmly wiping the blood off his face, he glares at the body and mutters about how worthless captives dare to threaten their master. Then he turns to Ananse and kneels in front of her, guilt and desperation etched across his face. He apologizes profusely, saying it's all due to his negligence. He begs her to punish him, offering his life as payment for his failure, just as she used to command. Ananse watches in a daze, too stunned to process his words. He's still pleading when her body gives out, and she collapses in front of him. His eyes go wide, and he scrambles forward, screaming her name as he catches her limp form. Ananse sees herself in the void again, wondering if she really died this time or if she will come back to life again. Just as she's grappling with the thought, her reflection appears before her. It's her, but not quite. It's like another version of herself with a different personality. This other self smirks and asks her why she's so desperate to live now, when she once craved death so badly. Ananse jolts awake in her bed, gasping in shock. Was it just a dream? But when she looks down, she notices her clothes and bandages have been changed. Someone must have brought her here while she was unconscious. She sighs in relief and murmurs to herself that she's still alive. Glancing around the room, she recalls the woman she saw in her dreams, the one who looked just like her, but so empty, like she didn't want to live anymore. Was that really her? Ananse stares at her reflection in the mirror, trying to piece together who she is. Just then, she spots a tattoo by her side, two snakes intertwined to form the infinity symbol. Before she can inspect it further, a guard's voice interrupts from outside her door, asking if she's awake. Panicking, she shouts for him not to come in yet and scrambles to get back in bed, but ends up bumping into her desk. She stumbles, and as she hits the ground, a book tumbles out from a hidden compartment under the desk. The name Ananse is written on the cover, the same name Solteo called her right before he ended her life. Trembling, she opens it, curious if it's some kind of diary. The first line confirms it: I, Ananse, am the master of the greatest captive merchant clan in the empire, the Regba merchant clan. She drops the book, her heart racing. Everything spins as she tries to process the revelation. Is she really the head of a captive merchant clan? Not wanting to believe it, she rushes to the balcony for air. Her thoughts are interrupted when the guard outside clears his throat and says he's here to report that a new premium captive has arrived at the estate. Ananse stares down at the courtyard, where a group of people are gathered. In the center is the new premium captive, surrounded by guards. The Regba merchant clan, known as the most powerful captive traders in the Holy Empire, play a pivotal role in the emperor's conquests. Whenever neighboring lands are overtaken, Regba's mercenaries swarm in, capturing as many refugees and prisoners of war as possible. Out of these captives, the most prized are selected to be categorized as premium captives, a rare and valuable group that includes the highest of noble bloodlines and mystical beings long thought to be extinct, like dragons or vampires. As the new premium captive glares up at Ananse from the courtyard below, the guards immediately take offense. They reprimand him for daring to look at their lady with such defiance and move to blindfold him. Another captive, who isn't classified as premium, leaps up, shouting for the guard to release His Royal Highness. But before he can finish, a blade is driven through his chest, and the guard tosses his lifeless body aside without a second thought. The new premium captive cries out in anguish, his voice muffled through his gag as tears stream down his face. The guards sneer and remind him that all captives here, no matter their title or status, belong to Lady Ananse. They drag him to his knees and beat him mercilessly as he struggles, screaming in pain. Ananse watches everything from her balcony in horror, thinking that the guards are just ending people's lives, like it's nothing. She can't believe that she is the master of such a horrible place and wonders what she should do and thinks that she needs to recover her memory immediately. She turns and dashes back to her room, hoping the diary might hold more answers. According to the diary, most captives are categorized and sold without going through Ananse, but premium captives must be refined by her own hands. Ananse's reading is interrupted when a maid named Finn crashes into the room and the bowl of water she is holding falls to the ground. Ananse puts down the diary and starts to ask her if she is alright, but the maid cuts her off by pleading with Ananse to forgive her, and she explains what happened while shaking in fear. She pleads with Ananse to spare her life, which makes Ananse feel so bad. She asks Finn if she is hurt, and Finn stands up, saying that she is alright, and thanks Ananse. Ananse thinks that she doesn't want to see anyone else get hurt or unalived, at least until she finds out more about who she is. Just then, there is a knock on the door, and the pink-haired man enters the room, apologizing for intruding. When he steps on the bowl of water, he looks at Finn, and she looks at him in shock, calling him Grand Chamberlain. He steps closer as he asks her what's the meaning of this, and says that the very least she can do is to be of use to Lady Ananse. Ananse quickly steps in front of Finn as she tells the Grand Chamberlain that Finn was simply trying to help her and ask him what he wants to do. The Grand Chamberlain apologizes to her, saying that he merely wished to ask her if they should cage Solteo, who Ananse recalls as the man that tried to end her life. Then she wonders what she should say. She sends Finn away, and tells the Grand Chamberlain that he should send Solteo back to where he originally stayed. The Grand Chamberlain beams as she tells her that it is truly respectable for her to keep an insolent captive as close to her as possible. He also says that it was certainly worth assigning him to the chamber next to hers, which shocks Ananse, who wonders if she just gave the order to put the man who tried to end her life in the room next to hers, and wonders how she could be so foolish. She starts to walk away as she wonders what to do, and the Grand Chamberlain notices her unease. He asks her if she is still feeling sick and says that if that is not the case, Why does she refuse to meet his eyes while moving closer to her? She immediately shoves him away as she tells herself that she has to keep it together because there are more than just a few people here after her life. First, she needs to be forceful with the Grand Chamberlain. She yanks him by his chain and tells him not to cross the line, unless he wants to lose his head, calling him a worm, while she thinks that she needs to bare her fangs before she is attacked. She tells him to get lost, and the Grand Chamberlain looks at her in admiration as he says that this is how the real Lady Ananse should be. Then, there's a loud crash outside. Ananse demands to know what's happening, and the Grand Chamberlain casually mentions that the new premium captive from the Glacial Kingdom has arrived. He also says that the captive is apparently still holding on to his pride, and suggests that Ananse punish Solteo publicly to send a clear message to the new premium captive about his place. Ananse starts to refuse, but he cuts her off, saying he trusts she'll put them in their place and break them completely, as he skips to the door. The Grand Chamberlain opens the door to reveal two guards holding the new premium captive, who is struggling, and ordering them to let him go. However, he stops when he sees Ananse. He yells at her, calling her Electo's filthy minion, and asks her how dare she do this to him and his people. The Grand Chamberlain waves at the guards, they nod and immediately gag the premium captive. Then the Grand Chamberlain tells Ananse that the premium captive is quite young and lively, and it seems like he will provide her with much entertainment starting the following day. She tells the Grand Chamberlain that she doesn't think she will have the time, and he says he does realize that she has much work to do. He brings out an envelope saying that he is not confident the Emperor will allow her more time, and that they have received word that if there is a delay in delivering captives this time, it will not end well for her. Ananse's gaze falls to the royal seal on the envelope and a sudden memory flashes before her eyes. She sees herself holding her father's lifeless body, crying uncontrollably as the Emperor descends a grand staircase. He looks down at her with a twisted smile, asking if she finally understands what happens when she disappoints him. He tells her that if she follows in her father's footsteps, she will become his next plaything. Because of the memory she just got, she barely notices that the Grand Chamberlain is still speaking until he calls her name, snapping her back to reality. He asks her if everything is alright and if she has perhaps overworked herself. She tells him that she is fine and that she simply feels lightheaded. Then she wonders if what she just saw is her memory, and thinks that things are so much more complicated now that she knows that the Emperor is involved. The Grand Chamberlain sends the guards and the premium captive away, and after they leave, he asks Ananse if he should call for the healer once more, but she refuses. He spots the diary on the table and starts to reach for it as he asks her what it is, but she snatches it away, yells at him not to touch it, and then wonders if she overreacted. However, the Grand Chamberlain doesn't think she did. He gushes, saying that he simply lives for the moments when she rough-handles him. Then he tells her he will take his leave so she can rest before she begins training Scotty, referring to the premium captive, tomorrow. After the Grand Chamberlain leaves, Ananse glances back at the diary, realizing she has no choice but to trust its contents and work with what she has. Meanwhile, two guards are escorting Solteo back to his room. As he walks, he wonders why Ananse had him put back in his old quarters, and what she's planning. Solteo knows Ananse isn't the type to just brush off what he did to her, and he remembers her last words. He questions whether she truly had a change of heart and thinks back to how scared she looked when she fled. Then he wonders if she has ever seen Ananse that fearful of anything. They run into the Grand Chamberlain, who says to Solteo that he trusts that there is no need to increase the guards to watch over a worm like him, and asks him if he would be a good boy. Solteo responds by telling the Grand Chamberlain not to fret, and says that if he does attack again, he would do it when there aren't any guards around. The Grand Chamberlain laughs as he walks away, and says that he should get to it before he is added to the Emperor-Electo's taxidermy collection. Ananse hears the door, and wonders if the Grand Chamberlain is back already. She thinks that this isn't good, because she still doesn't have much information to go on, and the pages about the captive training in the diary are ripped out. According to the diary, she used to host an annual black market event called the Night of Regba. This year, she is supposed to present a premium captive to please the Emperor, or else she might become his next plaything. The thought sends a chill down her spine. She thinks there is no time to waste, and she never leaves her room to Solteo's room. When she enters the room, she starts to tell him that she wishes to speak to him about something, but stops when she sees him sitting down on the railing of the balcony. He calls her master Ananse, and says he was not expecting her to greet a miscreant like him with her presence. Then he asks her if that night isn't a perfect evening to die. In the imperial palace, the sound of a whip echoes through the halls as a man screams and pleads for mercy, causing the guards to tremble in fear. A knight approaches and asks if the chancellor is still entertaining the emperor. The guards confirm and let him in. The knight walks in and bows before the emperor in greeting, and says he has received the word about Ananse. The emperor simply replies by saying, "Is that so?" The man he is flogging crawls and clings to his leg as he pleads with him to have mercy. The emperor raises his whip and flogs the man some more, and when he finishes, he kicks the man to the side. Turning back to the knight, the emperor asks about Ananse's condition. The knight reports that she has regained consciousness and is recuperating, with plans to begin the captive training of the conquered glacial prince the next day. The emperor orders the knight to increase surveillance on Ananse and to bring him detailed reports. His gaze wanders around the room, filled with lifelike figures encased in glass, and he muses that he'll need to make more space for his new pets. Meanwhile, back at Ananse's house, she rushes towards Solteo, yelling for him to stop. She grabs him, and he stares at her in surprise. Realizing what she is doing, she quickly lets him go and demands to know what he is thinking, and reminds him that he was ordered to stay in his room. Solteo retorts that since he failed to take her life, his only form of revenge is to destroy the chattel she plans to offer to the emperor. She recalls that she read the word chattel in her diary earlier. It had said, "Submission and obedience take hours of training." No doubt Solteo is the most expensive chattel out of all that I have nurtured. She thinks that her past self worked elaborately with Solteo, and if she can use him, she might be able to act like the master of Regba. Raising her hand, she tells him that if he genuinely wishes to repent, he should show more sincerity, as a properly trained captive would. Solteo grits his teeth and reluctantly agrees, calling her master as he takes her hand. He pulls her close, saying he will do as she wishes. Ananse pushes him away, asking what he is doing. He sighs and asks her if this is the game they are playing tonight. Suddenly, he throws her onto the and kneels before her, reassuring her that the guards have stripped him of any weapons. He then kisses her feet, saying that it is incredulous that she would trust a captive who tried to end her life. He points out that even a bed captive would have more dignity than her. Ananse slaps him with trembling hands and says that it is enough. Then she mutters to herself about being in a dire situation and wonders how she can let things escalate. Before she can leave, Solteo grabs her again, pushing her back onto the bed. She yells at him, asking him what he thinks he is doing, while shrinking away from him. He slides his finger along her wrist, saying he knows Ananse's body better than anyone else, and Ananse isn't someone who would get flustered by just his lips. Then he grabs her by the collar and asks her who she really is. She starts to speak, but Solteo cuts her off, shaking her and asking again who she really is. He tells her if she has any excuses, now would be the time to make them. Ananse asks if he's implying she's not herself. He insinuates that she used magic to take over Ananse's body, but she interrupts him, yelling that she is Ananse. She adds that she just can't remember where she is or who everyone around her is, which takes him by surprise. Solteo grits his teeth as memories of their first meeting flood back. He remembers Ananse burning his entire village to the ground. He was tied up and forced to kneel before her, surrounded by her guards. She had looked at him and remarked how unfortunate it was that he was the last of the dragon bloodline, and maybe she should have spared a few others. She'd grabbed his horn and shown him an earring, explaining that it would seal all his powers. As she forcefully pierced his ear with it, she coldly wondered if he'd ever managed to find the reversal word to break the seal. Back in the presence, Solteo lets her go, saying he will be looking forward to how many days she will last once the truth gets out. As he turns to leave, she calls out, saying that's exactly why she needs his help right now. He spins around, reminding her that she seems to have forgotten how much he is the one who has longed for her death more than anyone else. Ananse starts to panic, unsure what to do, but then remembers that she read about the seal in her diary. She quickly brings up the fact that his powers have been sealed, which causes him to halt in his steps. When he turns around, she tells him to help her act like Ananse for the time being, and she will break the seal when she regains her memories. She continues by saying that the past her is the one he resents, so it is only right that he gets his revenge when she has her memories back. Solteo steps closer, his eyes narrowed, muttering that her nerve makes him think she might actually be Ananse after all. He asks if she's sure she won't regret it when she remembers everything. He reminds her of how she trampled the dignity of a dragonborn, how she annihilated his entire clan, and how she pierced him with that cursed earring, robbing him of everything. Then he leans in, his voice almost a whisper, asking if she's sure she won't regret making him recount all she did to him with his own mouth. She pushes him away, saying that he won't regret it, but until then, they are both in the same boat. Then she stares at him with sadness lingering in her gaze. He can see she's telling the truth and reluctantly agrees to her deal. He starts walking away from her, asking her if she remembers the reversal word to break the seal, and she tells him that she doesn't, but she will figure it out. She says she left a diary behind, so she will try hard enough, and he tells her while opening a drawer that if she has the time to idle away and talk about trying, why doesn't she use it to recall what her body remembers? Then he brings out a chain, saying that she should remember the kind of woman she was, and how she treated her captives. Then he asks her if that wouldn't strengthen her resolve to make a deal with him and calls her dearest master while holding the chain out of her. He tells her that if she doesn't want to, she can leave, and he won't stop her, and she gulps nervously. She reaches out to him, saying she's the one who asked for his help in the first place. With that, he grabs her, puts her on his lap, and starts kissing her ears. He tells her that first, she should stop talking like a half-wit. She shouldn't speak at length in front of people, and never apologize. He kisses her, and she asks him what does that have to do with what he is doing now. He replies that she needs to learn how to deal with captives if she wants to become an Ananse. Then he asks her if she knows what it takes to control a captive that runs amok. She closes her eyes, saying no, and he tells her to open her eyes. When she does, he reminds her that she is the one who permitted this act. She apologizes to him, and he quickly flips her so that she faces him, as a reminder that he told her that a master never apologizes to a captive. To know how Ananse trains her new premium captive, please comment for part 2. Thanks for watching, bye.